Greetings all, and welcome to the first installment of Dual-Wielder's Writing Debugging, where I'll break down writing tips and tactics into bite-sized chunks to help you improve your own writing. This time, let's take a look at one of the most important things you should factor in, and that's to begin with the end in mind. This is one of the first and most common pieces of advice you'll hear when you ask for guidance, but what does this really mean? To put it simply, you should have the ending to your story completed before you begin crafting the major story beats. How are your characters different at the end of the tale than they were at the beginning? How has the world changed? What happened to facilitate these events? All of this needs to be decided before you get to the end. Of course, you could always just wing it, but you could very well find that you've written yourself into a corner. You won't be able to properly set up payoffs or foreshadow future events. If you don't know where your characters are going to end up, you won't be able to properly set up their arcs and development. Let's take a look at two examples of beginning with the end in mind, one in which it was done well, the other in which it was done poorly. In the first Terminator film, the end was clearly in mind during the writing. We find out that the AI known as Skynet will take over the world and all but eliminate humanity. Despite the odds though, a man by the name of John Connor leads the charge against Skynet and manages to bring it down. But how did all of this happen? Well, John was trained by his mother. But how did she gain those skills? Well, Skynet had developed a time machine, you see, and it sent back one of its Terminator units to kill John Connor's mother before he could be born, thus retroactively preventing its defeat. The human resistance sends back one soldier before they destroy Skynet and the time machine, a man by the name of Kyle Reese. He explains to Sarah Connor all that will happen, and ends up fathering John Connor himself. He's later killed by the Terminator, but Sarah crushes it with an industrial press. The discovered remains of the Terminator unit then kickstart the formation of Skynet, thus setting all of these events in motion. Sarah will then begin learning everything that John will need to know, thus preparing him for what's to come. The writers knew that the world would need to be drastically restructured, and thus these loose ends are accounted for. They began with the end in mind. Destroying the time machine meant that there could be no interference from the future, and explains why nothing intervenes during the events of T1. The sequels, unfortunately, shouldn't exist because of this, but in the confines of the first film, this was handled well. Now for an example in which this principle was not taken into account. Mass Effect 3. If you were a fan of the series back in 2012, then you know just how bad this was. What wasn't wrong with the ending? For a series so renowned for the player's previous choices mattering, none of them did when it came to the ending. The squad mates played next to no role in the final battle, which was a horrible downgrade from Mass Effect 2's suicide mission. The ending brought up questions that we've only gotten a few piecemeal answers to, even a decade later, and the ending choices all rely on tech that shouldn't even exist in-universe. The developers didn't begin with the end in mind. I've heard conflicting reports of how this came to be, some reporting that they just made it up as they went, others saying that they had to rewrite the game at the last minute, but no matter the reason, this ending was not set up at all by that which came before. The Reapers turned out to be less sentient than the Geth. Sovereign boasted about how they were godlike creatures in the first game, but the third tells us that they can't act outside their programming, which even the Geth can do. The game contradicts itself on numerous occasions, with characters claiming that the Reapers can't be beaten conventionally, only to then destroy several in space battles. Why are the Reapers even fielding husk troops when they can just blast everything from space? There's even the fact that the vast majority of the squad mates are new in the final game. While Mass Effect 2's suicide mission was phenomenal, it meant that any number or combination of squad mates could be dead, and thus their roles are minimal in the third game, which was a massive letdown. So to sum it all up, when writing a narrative of your own, begin at the end of your work and work your way backwards. If a character must learn humility, then they should have to achieve that through trials and failures, as they would be arrogant and narcissistic in the beginning. If an enemy must be defeated, then how do the protagonist and their allies become strong, smart, or skilled enough to do so? You need to begin with the end in mind. You can't just fly by the seat of your pants and hope for the best. Improv like that can work in a D&D campaign, or any other scenario where the goal is simple fun rather than narrative quality, but that can only get you so far. If this video helped you, then I'd appreciate you leaving a like and subscribing to see more. and may all of you have a weapon in each hand.